In a forgotten village, where morning mist whispered through baobab limbs, and the earth still sang in ancient songs, lived a girl named Ndoni. Barefoot and bright-souled, she swept the dust with tenderness, as if honoring the ancestors beneath it. She was young, yet the wind seemed to follow her like a memory. But not all eyes watched her with love. Mambe, the woman who wore the name of Stepmother like a crown of thorns, watched Ndoni with a gaze sharp as broken pottery. In Ndoni's quiet light, she saw everything she had lost and could never become. One day, she hissed through clenched teeth that light will drown in darkness. And in that moment, the shadows in the room seemed to lean closer, listening. Ndoni, Mambe said, voice oiled with sweetness. Tomorrow, before the rooster pressed to the sky, fetch me water from the Mabaka stream. Silence fell like a blade. The Mabaka stream, a name that called the tongues of elders. A place inked in stories no child wished to hear thrice. It was said the stream flowed not with water, but with memory. With the souls of the forgotten and the whispers of the dead. Fill it to the brim, Mambe whispered, handing her the old calabash. And do not return until you do. Ndoni, she called, her voice sweetened with poison, fetch water from the Mabaka stream. The girl froze. The name was a song no one dared sing. For Mabaka was a place stitched in warning and whispered tales, where spirits seek the living and never gave them back. And so, at first light Ndoni walked. Past the termite mounds, past the whispering groves where spirits perched unseen. The earth grew quiet, unnaturally quiet. Even the birds seemed to fear their own wings. When she reached the Mabaka, it did not greet her with ripples. It breathed. The stream pulsed like a living wound, glowing faintly in the mist, and the air turned thick with forgotten themes. She knelt to feel the gale. But the stream didn't just reflect her face. It whispered it. Ndoni, it sang, child of light. Then the world turned water, and pulled her under. In the hush below, time forgot itself. A goddess rose from the river's soul, cloaked in mist, crowned in starlight. Why have you come, child? She asked. I was sent, Ndoni wept. I had no choice. But the goddess looked into her, and saw truth like a flame untouched by smoke. Then rise, said the goddess, not with fear, but with knowing. And the water let her go, not as a girl, but as a daughter of the unseen. The calabash in her hands shimmered like it carried the moon. Ndoni rose, not as a girl lost to the current, but as the current itself. The water clung to her like holy cloth. The calabash in her hand now pulsed with memory. Not of the past, but of all possible futures. The forest, once heavy with dread, now breathed in color. Birds returned to their song. Leaves bowed as if in prayer. She had not just survived the stream. She had been rewritten by it. The path home no longer threatened, it honored. Trees that once whispered warnings now sang her name. Fireflies hovered like ancestral eyes, lighting each step in soft praise. Ndoni's feet did not disturb the soil, they completed it. And in her chest, silence bloomed, not empty, but sacred. She was no longer walking back to her village. She was carrying a new world with her. When Ndoni returned, the villager changed. Even the dust felt new. Mambe met her eyes and staggered. For in Ndoni now walked something ancient, something sacred. And Mambe's own shadow began to recoil from her. Mambe paced like a jackal trapped in a snare. The sky no longer listened to her whispers. The wind no longer carried her scent. She wrung her hands as if to squeeze out the guilt, but it clung like wet ash. And the village was still. Too still. The air had turned against her. Even time hesitated. She could feel something approaching, and it carried judgment. The spirits came not in anger, but in balance. Mambe screamed, not from pain, but from truth. And as she vanished into the shadow she had fed for years, the village exhaled. Ndoni stood beneath the baobab once more, no longer just a girl, but a keeper of light. With the curse lifted, the village sighed like a wound exhaling. Children returned to laughter, elders to wisdom. The baobab tree stood taller. And beneath one such tree stood Ndoni, holding an empty calabash, still glowing with echoes. A butterfly, silent and free, landed on her open palm. She smiled, not because the journey was over, but because now, it truly began. Back in the stream where memory lives, the goddess watched in silence. Her reflection flickered in twilight, her eyes full of peace and prophecy. The water glowed faintly where Ndoni had stood, blessed and brave. And if one listened closely, the mist whispered, "The river does not forget, and neither shall she." Ndoni emerged not as the girl who had left with trembling hands and a borrowed breath, but as one who had touched the marrow of truth, drunk from the wellspring of the unseen, and stood unblinking in the gaze of the eternal. Her bare feet kissed the banks of the Maboka stream, and the waters did not dare pull her back. For now, she bore the mark of the goddess. A light not blinding, but humbling. A silence not empty, but sacred. The calabash in her hands no longer bore cracks of edge. It shimmered like the sky moments before rain, heavy with promise, trembling with memory. And the waters within it glowed faintly, as if carrying the voice of the ancestors home. With each step through the forest, the earth seemed to tilt gently, respectfully. Banana leaves bowed, fireflies hovered like sentinels. And even the wind hushed its chatter, allowing only the sum of reverence to rise. Ndoni walked not with pride, but with the stillness of one who had been undone and remade. A vessel of story, sorrow, and awakening. She returned to the village not with fanfare, but with a silence that stirred something ancient. Those